I wrote to 50 radio stations over the course of that Christmas. I know I shouldn't do this, Alessandro. Can I just have a quick selfie with you? Seeing Cafu at an airport. They say never meet your heroes. That ain't strictly true. Meet them, have selfies taken with them. To get started,
why journalism for you and commentary? What is it like being in your position as a commentator, and what do you sort of do on a day-to-day basis?
Well, why journalism? I went to uni in 1990, and it wasn't with the intention of being a journalist or a broadcaster at all. I'd had an interest in football when I was growing up, and sport in general. Probably cricket as much as football as a youngster. But, you know, football was in a bad place in the 1980s. It was very different to how it is now. And I'd always listened to a lot of radio growing up. I'm an only child, and just loved having the radio on. It was fantastic, good companion listening to music stations in the Midlands where I was brought up. And I went to university with the thought really of going into finance in some sort. I'd done a little bit of work experience whilst I was at school, working in Birmingham with a finance company, and really fancied that. So I went to uni to do an economics degree. The only problem was I wasn't clever enough to get an economics degree, and I realised after about 6 weeks that was probably going to be the case. But in the first 6 weeks I've been there, I'd signed up to do some stuff on the university radio station. And as soon as I spent any time in there, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. It was like sort of road to Damascus moment of this is it. This is it for me. I want to be a broadcaster. And I'd gone to uni with the express intention of watching a lot of football whilst I was there, as opposed to doing a lot of work. Watching a lot of football, that's what I want to do when I'm at uni. And so the two sort of married up. Within sort of 3 or 4 weeks of starting at uni, I was reporting on games for the university radio station. And from that point had a phenomenal amount of luck in meeting the right people at the right time, and the right vacancies coming up for me at the right time. And that sort of gave me a little bit of a kickstart in my career. So I was working then in local radio within about 6 months, just doing reporting on games. And then I left uni and went and did a journalism diploma, broadcast journalism diploma. So I do actually have a qualification, but it's a broadcast qualification. So I'm a qualified news journalist, news broadcaster. So that was my way in. And I never thought at that stage that things would turn out as they have. I'm very fortunate that 30 years on, I'm still able to essentially watch football and get paid for it, which is sort of a pinch me moment.
Yeah, I know that's what everyone would love to be doing, essentially. But talk to me about that transition coming out of uni and into this sort of professional working environment. What was that like in the early stages, and what sort of challenges were you coming across? Because you mentioned it's really nice to hear that you had that moment of where you were like, right, this is what I want to do and I want to pursue this from now on. But the stages after that, how did that feel, and the transition? You mentioned you were slightly lucky as well in terms of, what do you mean in terms of being lucky?
Well, I was lucky in that the local radio station. So I went to Exeter University, and the local radio station doesn't exist anymore, but was Dead and Air, and they actually weren't that far away from losing their franchise. And it takes something special for an independent local radio station to be able to lose a franchise, but they managed it. And it would be unfair to say the station was on its uppers, but I benefited from there being very few people. There was one guy there that did sport, who I was good friends with, and he looked after me. He wasn't that much older than me really, but he was furthering his own career by reporting for Capital Radio in London at the weekends. So that meant that there were vacancies to do a lot of sport. So we ran a sports show on local radio station, and there were 3 people that worked on it, and we were all teenagers. The other 2 were Russell Fuller, who's a tennis correspondent for 5 Live, and Jonathan Wall, who became the program controller for 5 Live. And the 3 of us were doing a local radio station sports show on a Saturday afternoon. And there was a support team around us who were much more experienced, of course. But that sort of opportunity just wouldn't happen there. And so that's when I talk about luck. You assume that, oh, this is how it always works. And it's only when you're sort of in your mid-30s and you look back and you think, oh, that was just ridiculous. The number of things that sort of fell into place for me to be able to get the experience then that served me in good stead, because you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And if you can make them in front of 5,000 people and 10,000 sheep, it's a much better way than making much more high-profile mistakes. So I really was just in the right place at the right time, and then ended up with my news qualification, getting a job. I was working for Club Call, which is a it sounds daft now, but in the pre-internet age, it was an 0898 phone number service. So you could pay 50 pence a minute to phone from work when your boss wasn't looking and find out the latest at your football club. And I got the job there because somebody lost their job, and he said, well, if you're getting rid of me, this fella's all right. So I got a massive helping hand getting that job. That was when I was still at college. So the last 3 months that I was at college, I was effectively distance learning and doing this job. I lost that job. They made me redundant, and that seemed like the end of the world. A fortnight, I wrote to 50 radio stations over the course of that Christmas. That would be 1993. And one of them came back and said, well, you're in luck. We've got a vacancy for a junior journalist, a news journalist who can do a little bit of sport. So it was like I'd written my own job. So I moved up to Middlesbrough. When I was there, I happened to meet somebody who said, well, you know, that Capital Radio, who I used to work for, have got a vacancy. So I got on well with him. He recommended me for that job. So I only got that job because I'd had a personal recommendation from the boss's mate. So I was then working for Capital Radio at 21, having had a career's worth of luck over a 3-year period to get there. And it subsequently turned out they thought they'd hired somebody else because they got a demo tape, and they said about 18 months after I'd been there, well, we quite liked your demo tape, but we didn't like this, we didn't like that. And I said, I never sent you a demo tape. And it turns out that was Adrian Durham. So there you go. So I'm not being sort of disingenuous. I had extraordinary amounts of luck over the first 3-4 years of my career and beyond. But I mean, to get started, I had so many helping hands that really I probably didn't deserve to be in a position then that I could get myself established. Because the most critical thing I would say for anybody coming into the industry is that you need experience, you need miles on the clock at whatever level. You've got to be comfortable in front of a microphone, and you've got to have a rough idea of what you're doing. You're going to get better the more experience you get. But you need that experience, be it on local radio, community radio, working for football clubs, hospital radio, doesn't matter. It's experience. Miles on the clock is what you need. And I was in a position that I could get those.
Yeah, I mean, that is a pretty incredible series of events, what you've just described to me there. And I just wanted to sort of go into this sort of personality of yourself, Jim. Have you always been a confident person, and did you always think you were good enough to make a career out of commentary in those early days when you went to Capital 21? Can you recall any memories and challenges during those times, or were you generally a confident person and you knew that you'd be able to succeed?
Well, that's interesting you say, have you always been a confident person? Because I wouldn't describe myself as a confident person now. I was then. I was, and I don't know what it was confidence. There was a naivety that, well, this is what I want to do, and so I'm going to do it, without stopping to think that, well, maybe there are 100 people better at the job than you who also want to do it. And that, I think, is a problem for guys of your generation that's different for me being 30 years older than you, that now there's so many more people believe they can do the job. The industry in those days was a closed shop. I've never got any chance of getting into broadcasting. Now, it looks as though it's easy to get into broadcasting, and that probably in a way makes it harder. So I had a confidence that, yeah, I thought I could do it. Don't get me wrong. I thought I could do it, and I think as a youngster and less battle hardened, you're probably a little bit more confident and had a bit more of a swagger about me in those early days. I don't look at myself now actually as, in comparison to other commentators and friends in the industry, as being particularly confident. I'm not lying awake at night racked with self-doubt, but I'm conscious of what I can do, and I'm also conscious of what I'm not very good at, and the older you get, I suppose those doubts begin to sort of play a little bit more on your mind at times. So I don't think you have to be, completely exuding confidence. I won't mention any names, but there are a couple of people I look at in the industry who I think are phenomenally confident, and I think, God, what I would give to just be able to completely own situations in the way that you do, and never seemingly have a moment of self-doubt. They probably do as well, but the way that they handle themselves will make you think that they don't. So I don't think you have to be, you've got to have belief in your ability, but I don't think you've got to be sort of really ultra confident as a person to be able to succeed necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, that's brilliant. And Jim, you've covered some pretty extraordinary events during your career, and I just want to get into World Cups and other big sporting events. I mean, you've done Premier League, you worked for ESPN, you've spent a large amount of your career at talkSPORT. And I just want to ask you about those World Cups. I mean, I recently covered the Women's Six Nations at Twickenham between Ireland and England. It was one of my first times. It was my first ever rugby game that I covered live. I'd done a few football ones before. And I walked out and I just thought, like, wow, I could not believe that I was there, and I was there to watch the game and report on it, as you referred to earlier. What was it like being at a World Cup, and have you any memories of being there and you just been like, whoa, I can't believe this? And anyone you've spoke to that stood out at those World Cups?
Well, the first major tournament that I did was Euro 96. And it was surreal because the previous World Cup, which had been in the States, obviously in 1994, I hadn't gone to that. I was working by that stage, but predominantly in news. So I'd watched it, and it would have been cool. Just imagine one day I'm in a position that I can do a tournament. And then 2 years later, the next one comes around and I'm actually doing it. I was reporting rather than commentating at that stage, but just being part of it, having the accreditation, being in the games that everybody's watching is a phenomenal experience. And it takes a little bit of getting your head round. And then I went to the next World Cup in France in 98, and I've been fortunate that I've covered them all since then. And they are the best occasions. As we speak now, I'm looking ahead to going to Germany in less than 3 weeks' time. These days, I'm a father of 4. That has its own complications because you're thinking, I'm going to be away from the kids for 5 weeks. But that is the only downside, because they are the best times. It's a journey from start to finish. You're watching the best players in the world. You are seeing the best broadcasters in the world, some of whom you know, some of whom you don't. But the whole working environment is fantastic. It's hard work, obviously, but so enjoyable. I love it. They will always be the happiest of times, and it sort of makes it all worthwhile. But there's still, I don't know how many major tournaments I've done now. This next one might be the 11th. 12th, but they're still pinch yourself moments that, well, I'm actually here. I'm actually seeing all these games that people around the world are watching. And you do get to meet your heroes, even if you sort of just in the media center and Alessandro Del Piero is walking in for a cup of coffee and it's, I know I shouldn't do this, Alessandro. Can I just have a quick selfie with you? Seeing Cafu at an airport, all sorts of things that have happened in the past. They say never meet your heroes. That ain't strictly true. Meet them, have selfies taken with them, because it's great. And I'm just like a little boy. I'm still like that little boy that went to university and sort of open-mouthed, naive. Can I really do this for a living? And I still feel that way. It's brilliant. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and Jim, I really wanted to touch on the Euros coming up. How does one prep for that much content that you're going to be delivering over the course of the 3-4 weeks that you're over in Germany? How much work goes into that period beforehand, and in terms of research into all the different teams, the players, the storylines, the clubs? You want to be on it, and especially in commentary, you need to have those facts, in front of you at all times. So how much work goes into that stage before you fly over, and how long are you going to be there for? And do you know what games you're going to be covering? And is there a strict schedule?
Yeah. So in terms of the preparation, it's actually not that different. We all do it in different ways. And one of my mates I know, have got pretty much everything done already. So as we're speaking, I'm trying to think how long it is till I fly out. I fly out a fortnight today. I haven't done any work for it at all. Not at all. Literally not one bit, because the Premier League season only finished 10 days ago. I've been doing the playoffs. I did the FA Cup final last weekend. I haven't had time to think about it as yet. And I'm not fazed by that, because the preparation for, I will do all the England games. So a lot of the games that I do, half the games that I do over the course of the tournament will be England matches. I've seen every England game for quite a few years now, and very privileged for that to have been the case. But it makes the preparation very different, because you're not sort of learning players from scratch. It's all building up existing notes and just sort of cut and paste on Microsoft Word is how I live my life. I'm just moving stuff from one file to another in terms of preparation. So the next games, England have got 2 warm-up games, one against the Bosnians, one against Iceland. They will take a bit more work, because I'm starting from scratch with those 2 teams. It's going to take me 6 hours of preparation maybe for each of those teams. So that's, most of a day's work. I've got the kind of memory now that it's like cramming for an exam. There's no point in me doing it too much in advance. It will not be in my head. So I need to do the Bosnia game. I will probably do this Friday. I'll do the Bosnians ahead of the Monday game. That will be in my head until, well, hopefully it will still be there by the time the game kicks off. It will certainly be out of my head by Tuesday morning. Then I'll be thinking about Iceland. But I will then, that week, the week before I travel, start looking at other games that I'm doing. I've already got my itinerary. I'm doing 3 England games. I'm doing another couple of games in the group. I'm then doing every knockout game that England could be in. I'm doing, well, assuming that they don't finish 3rd in the group. So I'm doing the game that they'll be in if they win the group. I'm also doing the game they will be in if they finish 2nd in the group. In the round of 16, the quarters, I'm doing a semi-final, don't know which one yet. England's if they're in it, but if they're not, it could be either. And then I'm doing the final. That is however many games, 12, 13 games over a month. That's not very much for us. I often do 17 or 18 in a month. So it means that I actually have a little bit more time to fine-tune the preparation. I will be in a position that I can watch. I've got a subscription to a scouting website, so I can watch highlights and read scouting reports of other games. For the Euros, there's so much stuff gets put online and posted for every game, actually makes the preparation a lot easier. And we've got there's a few, I would call them stats gurus within the industry, whose full-time job is to write statistical preparation packs for commentators. One of those is a good mate of mine, Johnny Blaine. I feel like he's my right-hand man, really. He does all of the stats for talkSPORT. So I'm not starting from, I say I'm starting from scratch. I'm starting from scratch with a blank sheet of paper in terms of my commentary notes, but it's not a blank sheet of paper, because I'm going to have 30 pages of stuff from Johnny that I can read through. And the 6 hours of prep that I'm talking about is me moving the stuff basically from his sort of long form statistical preview down to 2 sheets of paper that I know where everything is. A lot of the stuff I will never say or use. You just don't know what's going to be relevant. And I guess that's part of the art, is putting the right 10% of your prep on air and not the wrong 90%.
Yeah.
That's something that takes a bit of getting used to. And I haven't always been very good at that, but hopefully I'm getting better at it now. But that's my preparation. And then the time out there will be watching us doing our games. I will go to as many other games as I can get into, which might not be very many. Maybe another 3 or 4. I will try and watch every game that's on, not necessarily live, but I will try and catch up with it every game. So I've seen at least 45 minutes of highlights of every game that is played. And that's how I do my preparation. But as I say, everybody is different. One of the leading commentators on telly, I know, will pretty much have all his work done for every game already. But he needs that, because if he was in my position now, he'd be panicking. I can't do it that way. It's not the way that my brain is wired. So we're all very different. There's no right or wrong way. It's just finding over time the processes that work, that you feel happiest with, that you know that you're absolutely prepared for when that first whistle blows.
Yeah. And I just want to dive into that preparation a wee bit more, because it sort of links into what I was going to ask about next. You mentioned the sheer amount of football that you're going to be watching when you're over there, and all of the games that are on. And you know yourself, these days on social media, there's so much information to consume compared to what it was like before. And as a journalist coming through the ranks, one of the things I really struggle with is trying to stay on top of things, because, it's because of social media, Twitter, everything. Breaking news is instant, and then it's just gone in a flash. How do you stay on top of things? And I suppose I'm trying to ask is, how do you stay organized and know this is what I want to do, and this is sort of my priority list? And then that sort of links into the preparation. In terms of the Bosnia game against England, is it something that experience over time has told you, right, I need to look for this, and then this is sort of less important, and then this is a wee bit more important, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So for that game, what do I need to know? From an England perspective, I need to know that players are going to be cut from the squad. I need to try and get into the mind of the manager in terms of what questions he's still got to ask, what questions he still wants answered. So that will dictate a few of the storylines about, who needs to have a good game here, who is in danger of being left out of the squad. So you're always trying to think of what the narrative might be, trying to predict what the headlines will be at the end of the night. So that's it from an England point of view. He plays in a very settled way, so the formation's always likely to be the same. There are seldom any huge surprises as far as Gareth Southgate and England are concerned. Bosnia is completely different. The players, I'll be honest, I haven't looked at the squad. If it's a squad of 25, I'm going to know about 2/3 of them. I need to make sure that I know the pronunciations critically. That's so important.
How do you learn those pronunciations?
Asking people. So getting in touch with the Bosnian press officer and saying, please, I'm commentating on the game for English radio. I want to pay you the respect of getting the names absolutely right. Please, can you just send me a voice memo, read out the list of your squad and send it to me on WhatsApp? And they'll all do that because and I'm sure they get so many requests. And then it's then sharing information. That's the older you get, the more information we all us commentators share with each other. Because there is so much to get, but if I've got that tends to be something I do that I will share with one or two of the others. Look, this is how we get it, so that we're all saying the same thing and we're all trying to get them right. I need to know how the Bosnians are going to play formation wise. I need to. It's more prevalent if I'm doing a game for television. I always do the tournaments for radio, but if I'm doing a game for television, it's absolutely essential that I've seen them play so that I can spot, if a tall Bosnian player is making a far post run through a melee and heads in from a corner, I need to have a fair idea of who that is, either from having seen previous set pieces and what they might do, or just being able to spot, okay, the tallest one is so-and-so.
Yeah.
So those are the things I'm looking for. I need to have 2 or 3 lines on every Bosnian player that are relevant. So if a substitute comes on, sort of the more a shadow member of the squad the player is, probably the more I need to know. Because if a player comes off the bench, I can't say, oh, they're bringing on so-and-so. I need to say they're bringing on so-and-so and something about him.
Yeah. And are these notes that you're taking, sorry to interrupt, are these taken all on your laptop? Are these handwritten? Because another thing that I struggled with when I was at Twickenham, because it was one of my first experiences and there was so many tries, England scored 14 in the end, I was putting down almost too much information, and then when it came to my match report, it was sort of hard to find where I'd said certain lines about things.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that process work when you're note taking, and when you're actually there commentating? Do you find it easy to scan things about different players, and is that an easy process?
Yeah, it's not too bad. So there are 2 different things there. So if I'm commentating on a game, I have pretty much all my notes for the match on 2 sheets of paper. One of them is just the players, and only the players. And the other is just it is more to do with lines about the countries. So, Bosnia's recent record, their recent results, whether they're any good at home, better away, or whatever that might be, or sort of the actual sort of match statistics. The way I do it, and very few do it like me. Some like to handwrite. I can't do that. My writing's not neat enough. It's too laborious a process. I do everything cut and paste on a Microsoft Word document. Which I physically print out, and I will have them in front of me. There are others who have everything on a tablet, on an iPad. I haven't got the technical competence to be able to do that and set things up that way. And you look at it and you think, oh, that's fantastic. All they've got to do is press on a player and it'll come up with all their info. I can't do that. I'm not clever enough to be able to work out how to do it. So I don't do it that way either. So I have mine printed out. I then will have a blank sheet of paper next to me. I will have, if you're on radio, for instance, there's lots of other things. You've got to plug the games that are coming up and this, that, and the other. You might have a list of reporters at other games. I will have all those on separate bits of paper, but everything is physically printed out. And in many cases, gaffer taped to the desk in front of me. So I haven't got to hold it. It's literally, I stick it down. But I've done so many games. I always work the same system. I know where everything is. I mean, it might be that I haven't got what I should be saying. It might not be written down there, but I know if it's there, I know where it's going to be. If I'm reporting on a game, I do it very differently. That I will have, again, literally a blank sheet of paper. I will draw a line down the middle of it, one for each side. I will put a few boxes on it, various different things that I'm going to fill in with scorers and bookings and corners and this, that, and the other. But essentially, all I'm doing is writing, he scored a goal. For instance, Foden cross, Kane header. Literally that, just bullet points. And then on another piece of paper, I will write longer hand notes for every report I'm going to do. But if I'm reporting, I have never done a written report in my life from a sporting event. So how you go about doing that, I don't know. From our point of view, I don't know whether the commentator from another game, if I'm just doing reports, I don't know if he's coming to me in 30 seconds or it might not be for 10 minutes. So I'm kind of thinking how I'm going to structure my next report, how I'm going to get into it, and how I'm going to get out of it. But the rest of it will be just a series of bullet points. I might actually write down the top line, write down the bottom line. That can change, and I might be frantically scribbling it out and be a rewrite depending on how long it takes. But they are very different skills, reporting and commentating. I don't do an awful lot of reporting. I really enjoy it when I do it. I don't do too much of it these days, but my commentary preparation is the same. And it takes, as I say, probably for every game, 6 to 8 hours. If I'm doing a TV game, it might take 12 hours, I suppose. But a lot of that is thinking what I'm going to do. And we're usually on air. I'm doing a game for Premier League Productions, for instance, for the world feed. That will be 10 minutes of talk before the game starts. And that actually takes a lot of preparation. I mean, it's 3,500 words, but you've got to get it right. So that takes a lot of that 12 hours of prep is writing that sort of stuff. But to say we're all different, I probably am slightly more laborious than many of my younger colleagues these days. So it probably ends up taking me a lot longer to do the same amount of work as they do.
Yeah, that is extremely fascinating to hear the sort of ins and outs of that and how that works. I've just noticed on this Zoom call we've got about 6.5 minutes left. There's one more question I want to ask you. Could you briefly just sum up your thoughts on England at the minute? In terms of the Euros, can they do it? Is Southgate the man? Can he fit all these, just the range of attacking talent that England have at their disposal at the minute? Can he make it work?
England can win this tournament. I don't know that I'd have them as favourites as the bookmakers have. I mean, a lot of that is patriotic money. I get that. But England can win it. He's got a phenomenal array of players that he can call upon. Can he gel them all and get them all working in the right way? Yeah, I think he probably can. I like him as a manager a lot. I don't think he has had the credit that he deserves for a lot of what he's achieved, for whatever reason. And a lot of what he's achieved is uniting what had been a very divisive dressing room that he inherited and had historically been that way. Never get the impression that that is the case now. And he doesn't get the credit he deserves for that. Is he a coach with the greatest tactical acumen in the world? He'd be the first to admit that no, probably not. But as an England fan, it's perfectly good enough, I think, for him to be able to bring the best out of the talent that he's got. I don't know whether I would, if I was an England manager, I would set up my England team in a very different way to the way that he sets his up. I would set mine up in the same kind of way that Manchester City play. But he is by his nature a slightly more defensive-minded manager. He's got some players in wonderful form, the likes of Foden and Palmer. I think John Stones' performance in the FA Cup final was a slight concern, but I think that John Stones is such a good player that he will be in a better position by the time the tournament comes round. I think that there are other areas that he would like to be a little bit stronger. Maybe centre half. I'm not piling on to Harry Maguire in the same way that a lot of other England fans are, but I do think he, in a very, very good team, is one of the weaker links now. And I don't think that England will be able to set themselves up in a position to win games to nil. They can't do what Southampton did to Leeds in the playoff final, for instance, score a goal and then soak up all the pressure in the world. I feel that England are a better side going forward than they are defensively, and are more likely to win games 2-1 rather than 1-0. That's a very simplistic generalisation, but you understand the point I'm trying to make.
So you think England can win it then? Yeah.
England can win it. I'm not saying that England will win it, but England certainly can win it. I do think I will see in my working career, don't get me wrong, the industry might spit me out in 6 months' time, but assuming that I go under 65, I think that England will win something within the next 15 years. I genuinely believe that, and it might well be this summer. I think that when England win a tournament, they will blow everybody else away, and I think that they have the ability to be able to do that. I really like the look of Germany. Not so hot on France, actually, but I really like the look of Germany with home advantage. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if England won it. It wouldn't surprise me.